evening. So I'd just like to first thank everybody for staying late, staying with us tonight for tonight's event. I also think it's really encouraging to see such a good turnout, for a research-focused presentation. For those of you who don't know, I am Dr. Proctor. I'm a senior research professor here at Albizu, and I'm also the director of the Institutional Center for Scientific Research here at the Miami campus. For those of you who didn't know that we have a research center, we do. The Research Center supports students and faculty through various activities, such as like tonight's event and other research colloquium series, presentations. Also, I'd just like to encourage everyone to go ahead and fix yourself a plate. We're trying to get rid of that food, but I should say, I talked to my wife and she would like me to save one of those puppy cookies, one of those sugar cookies for her. So as long as there's one left, we're good. Please, leave out everything else. And so not to cut into the presenter's time any longer, I'd like to next introduce our invited expert speaker. So tonight we have Marietta Suarez, who's currently a digital marketing analyst at World Media Interactive in Wynwood. She received her master's in research, measurement, and evaluation from the School of Education and Human Development at the University of Miami. Prior to earning her master's, she graduated magna cum laude with a bachelor's in psychology from the University of Miami. She has taught statistics courses at the University of Miami and has worked on several grant-funded research studies in different fields within the social sciences. She has extensive experience in the provision of statistical training workshops and has provided statistical consultation to faculty and students at the Duns Powell Dalton Community and Educational Wellbeing Research Center at the School of Education and Human Development Help Desk at UM. Her professional interests include statistical consulting, program development, evaluation, and implementation, and her field-specific expertise lies in meta-analysis. Please join me in welcoming Marietta to the lecture.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for staying here on a Wednesday, a little late, to hear about everything I basically know about this subject that to me is absolutely 100% fascinating. And I hope you find it absolutely 100% fascinating as well. So without any further ado, I guess let's get started. So today's lecture is about meta-analysis. So before we even get started, do we know the difference between a meta-analysis and a systematic review? Do we know what a systematic review is? Do we know what a literature review is? Literature review. Okay, great. That's a great start. So think of a systematic review as a literature review on steroids. It's basically compiling all the literature available in a specific field for the purpose of synthesizing it. A meta-analysis takes a systematic review on steroids a step further and actually not only summarizes everything, the entire knowledge about a particular topic, but it actually does some statistical work on that as well to arrive at an overall understanding of the results in a field for a particular topic in statistical terminology. So that's what we're going to learn about today. So we know what a lit review does, right? It summarizes literature. What is literature? Journal articles, book chapters, right? Scientific literature is what I'm referring to, not necessarily Sports Illustrated. So in scientific articles, mostly, we oftentimes find, especially in quantitative studies, not qualitative. Qualitative basically do like case studies of individuals, right? Whereas quantitative studies studying samples, right? So groups of people. So in quantitative studies, usually we have means, standard deviations, the number of people in the study, so the sample size, right? And the statistics associated with the methodology that was used to study that sample. So it could be a t-test, an ANOVA, a regression, a correlation. All of this sounds familiar? Okay, so these are what we call continuous outcomes. So what are categorical outcomes? Categorical outcomes are when we study things that can't be measured on a continuum. So things sort of a binary nature. So as a fail or succeed. So World Cup, right? Brazil fans? Yep. Anyway, so that's what we call a dichotomous outcome, right? Oftentimes it's an odds ratio. So particularly meta-analysis focuses on synthesizing effect sizes that we collect from primary studies that have been published. And these effect sizes can be of a continuous nature if they arrive from studies that measured things that fall on a continuum. So things like the average age of soccer players in the World Cup versus dichotomous outcomes, studies that focus on analyzing things of a dichotomous nature, such as windows. Make sense? So that's the first distinction. We have two kinds of studies. Studies that are continuous, studies that are dichotomous, have dichotomous outcomes. Any questions on that? We're good? Okay. So what does meta-analysis do? Like I said, we know what a lit review is. It summarizes literature in the field, systematic review, literature review on crack. So it's that, but much more intense. It goes much more in depth. Really summarizes everything that's out there. And a meta-analysis goes a step further and actually takes the information from all of these studies and quantifies it in a statistical way. Good? Okay. So when can we do a meta-analysis? Let's say you have a couple of studies that are of qualitative nature. So interviews with soccer players that were the MVPs at the World Cup. Can you synthesize that in a meta-analysis? No. Those are qualitative studies, right? We just mentioned we can't really do much with those. So step one, what we're synthesizing has to be quantifiable. So it has to come from quantitative studies. Empirical. What do I mean by empirical? We've collected data. We have something to back up whatever it is that we're writing the study about, right? Have we heard of the term before, empirical, often associated with research method, scientific research?
Yes.
See what I'm getting at? Okay, cool. So the studies have to be empirical. The studies should be quantitative instead of qualitative. We should be examining the same exact constructs or relationships in all of the studies. We're going to talk about why this is very extremely important. The findings should be comparable in statistical forms. Again, we're going to talk about what that means. And all of these questions, the last couple of ones that I touched upon, the constructs, the relationships, the comparable statistical forms, this all boils down to one of the biggest problems of meta-analysis, which we're going to discuss, which is basically the idea of comparability. Are we talking about apples and pears, or are we talking about apples and apples? Okay. So, again, some of the specific types of research that are very suitable for meta-analysis are any kind of research where the variables that were used can be measured with some kind of central tendency. What's central tendency? Anybody remember? Intro stats? Mean, median, and mode. You got it. Excellent. What else is good for meta-analysis? Pre-post contrast. So pre-post growth. Iniesta in the 2010 World Cup versus 2018. There's some growth there, I promise, I've seen them. Group contrast. So this is experimental versus control, right? We all know what that means. People that got the drug versus people that didn't. People that got the treatment versus people that didn't. Or naturally occurring groups, which we call quasi-experimental research, right? What are naturally occurring groups? Males and females, right? Can't be one or the other unless you're Kris Jenner. Something like that. Associations between variables, so correlational research, research that uses regression type analyses, where we're trying to see sort of which came first, the chicken or the egg, or as this goes up, this goes down, or vice versa, or as this goes up, as age goes up, so does the level of back pain that I have, right? Those kinds of associations. Okay, so these are all fantastic characteristics of studies that lend themselves for meta-analysis. So what are some of the advantages of meta-analysis? Okay. So I'm assuming that most of us in this room have at least one thing in common, right? Academic research. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So, and I'm also going to guess, because ours of you, I think it's social science, right? So most of us are interested in social science, right? So things like psychology, things like sociology, things like anthropology. Okay. I'm guessing our commodities extend beyond the ones that I just mentioned, right? So, a lot of studies are being conducted all the time, and things change all the time. I can turn on the news today and hear that milk is great for me, and I can turn on the news tomorrow and hear that milk is horrible for me, right? Has this happened to us? 1 second we hear something like drinking a glass of water, of wine is good every single night. The next day somebody's telling me to drink 2. I'm going to listen to the one that's telling me to drink 2. But the point is, a lot of times, a lot of studies are focusing on the same topic. The main distinction is they're being done at different intervals of time, different periods of time, or using different samples. Studies that are being done in the UK versus studies that are being done in the States versus studies in Australia. I don't know if there are people to study there other than kangaroos. Anyway, you got the idea, right? So different studies, different samples, different people, different time periods. How do we know who's telling the truth? Meta-analysis will tell you that, because meta-analysis is going to combine all of those studies and arrive at some big common aha interpretation of who's telling the truth and by how much. That's basically the first and biggest goal of meta-analysis. I mentioned systematic reviews. Here it is in my second bullet point. Basically, meta-analysis, again, provides statistical techniques to review studies, which is a step further than a systematic review, which is just summarizing them. We can include large numbers of studies. So how many of us remember from intro to stats, the bigger the sample, the better, right? Remember this? Okay. So meta-analysis has the biggest sample because it combines the samples from all the studies that are out there on this one particular topic. It has the biggest sample, which is what we're all after in stats, right? Okay, and influence of context, like I said. Are we doing the study in the States? Are we doing the study in Australia? Are we doing the study in the 70s with the hippies? Or are we doing the study nowadays, right? Context. In meta-analysis, we can determine the effectiveness, the difference of context across different groups of people, different samples, and we're going to talk about how we can do that. And again, last but not least, which you might have guessed I was going to get to this the second that I mentioned huge sample. We have more statistical power. If you don't remember what that is, that's fine. My heart is a little broken because I talked about that last year, but hopefully you remember. So we increase statistical power, we increase precision, we reduce sampling, are all very desirable statistical characteristics. Good? Okay. But of course, nothing is perfect. So some of the drawbacks of meta-analysis is the whole issue of comparability. Like I said, yes, it's very nice and sophisticated technique because we can combine studies from different time periods using different samples, but then the argument comes up, are you comparing apples to pears? Are you comparing apples to oranges? What are you really comparing here? Can you really compare a study with a sample of people from the 70s in the States to a study with a sample of people nowadays in Africa? Even if you're measuring the same constructs, even if your research methodology was exactly the same, if you gave the same interviews, the same questionnaires, you collected the same exact type of data, is it comparable, right? Because so much time has elapsed. Not only that, but the whole geographical barrier, right? So there's always that side of the argument. Garbage in, garbage out. Nobody likes to hear this, but we're human. Not all research is perfect. I'm sure you've read more than one article at this point in your career that compared to another one wasn't as good. Am I right? Well, guess what? One of the core principles of meta-analysis is we want to combine everything that's out there. Some of what's out there is not so good. We can't exclude that. And we're going to talk about why that's not necessarily always possible. So garbage in, the results might not be great. The file drawer problem, otherwise known as publication bias. Side note, I wrote an entire theoretical paper for about 2 years on publication bias. I can talk about this for years. We'll keep it simple. Publication bias is the whole idea that you spend a year working on your study, from conceptualization to developing a methodology, doing a lit review, recruiting your participants, collecting the data, analyzing it, and you don't get the results that you expect. You might not get statistically significant findings, or if you were researching the effectiveness of a treatment that you developed, and it turns out that people got worse, is that something you want to publish? The ethical answer should be yes. The realistic answer is that doesn't always happen. So for many reasons that I can talk about for years, not all research that gets done gets published. This is what we call publication bias. And this is one of the biggest problems that meta-analysis faces. Because again, our goal is to compile everything that's out there on the one topic. And finally, how many of you might be considering doing a meta-analysis at some point in your life? Okay, cool. Do you think you want to do a meta-analysis because you don't have to collect data and that's going to make it so much easier? No, you're on the right track. It's not. It's super time consuming. I'm going to walk you guys through an example of a meta-analysis that I actually conducted a couple of eons back. And you're going to see what I mean by time consuming and ridiculously laborious. Okay. So, a little bit more on publication bias. Like I said, I can talk about this for years and years and years. The two main reasons why studies may not necessarily get published are because of null findings. This is when they're not statistically significant, or because of negative findings, findings in the opposite direction. So your treatment made people worse. Why is this a problem? Well, if we assume our entire sample of studies, just like we have a sample of people in regular statistics, we have a sample of studies in meta-analysis. And just like we have missing data in regular statistics because someone didn't fill out the entire questionnaire, we have missing data in meta-analysis. Missing data in meta-analysis is publication bias. So if we have missing data, publication bias, and we assume that our sample of studies is random, and that publication bias affecting our sample of studies is random, that there are no systematic reasons why we have missing studies, we're probably okay. However, if there are systematic reasons why we're missing studies, we're probably not okay. How do you know why you have missing studies? You don't. So publication bias, like I said, is a big problem. There are ways to test to see, from a statistical standpoint, how big of a problem it could potentially be for your meta-analysis. But again, I could talk about this for years, so I'm just going to spare you. But just now, publication bias is probably, arguably, depending on who you ask me, the biggest problem meta-analysts face. Good. Okay, so let's talk about the actual fun, super mega fun process of doing a meta-analysis. So first of all, meta-analysis is teamwork, 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 teamwork. Why? You need probably someone who is an expert in the techniques. And there are many, many techniques that you need. Many particular skill sets that you need to conduct a successful meta-analysis. Chances are you're not going to find one person with all of that. You need time, you need money, you need multiple coders, you need people who are very avid readers, you need people who are content experts. So meta-analysis, like soccer, is a team sport. So number one, that's the first thing you need to know. Number two, and this is where the content expert comes in. Stage number one, formulating the problem. This is the person who is an expert in the field that you want to conduct a meta-analysis in. So let's say you want to conduct meta-analysis in psychotherapy. You probably need a psychotherapist because they're going to help you formulate a research question. They're going to help you determine the exclusion and inclusion criteria that's going to guide your lit search. They're going to help you determine the kinds of important information that you need to gather from the studies. So the content expert or experts are your best friends for stages 1, 2, 3 initially. Then you need the people with the meta-analytical skills. You need people who can evaluate the quality of the studies. You need people who have the skills to really sit there and gather all the studies in the first place. Then they need to evaluate their quality. They need to analyze them, integrate the outcomes. They need to code all the information. So this is your person with the know-how, or the people with the know-how. It takes more than one, because you need coding reliability. We're going to talk about what that means. Then, again, just like Ronaldo gets assisted scoring, just like any of the other just like any of the other big soccer players get assisted scoring goals, people need to work together to interpret the evidence of the results of the meta-analysis. Who are these people? The meta-analyst who crunched the numbers and came up with the statistical figures needs the help of the content expert from the beginning to to actually decipher in English what that means. Make sense? And finally, obviously, again, team effort when it comes to writing things up, creating pretty tables, pretty graphs, and presenting the results. So, usually, in a meta-analysis, you need at least 2 people, but ideally you want to be working in a group of 7 to 10. Oh, and by the way, this goes on for years. Just so you know. So make sure those people aren't going anywhere. Okay, so stage 1, formulating the problem. Like I said, this is where you need your content expert. So you need to define what the research question is. You need to define very clearly, very specifically, very methodologically, what it is specifically that you want to study. You need to define the variables. You need to define the relationships, right? So again, this is the first big step where you need to work very closely with your content expert, because they're the ones that are going to guide everything else that goes on later on. Okay? Okay. Searching the literature. You may think this is easy if you've ever sat down to do a lit review. Type in a couple of keywords, you're done? No. You type in the first set of keywords and you write down what those keywords are. Next, you write down the total number of hits that you got for that mix of keywords. Next, you open each and every single hit and save it. Save. Next, you have to sit there and read all of that. And then, you're going to do it again with a different set of keywords. Where do you get the keywords? Stage number 1, where you formulated the problem with the variables, with the relationships, with the content expert. And you're going to mix the order of the keywords multiple times. So are you going to sit there and search the literature once? No. You're going to do this for the first couple of months. Yes, months, if not years, depending on the scope of the project. And you may go back to your original question and modify it if you realize that there are millions of studies out there on whatever it is that you selected. And you might have to narrow it down. Or, if you initially find 5 studies with a possible combination of 15 keywords, you might have to go back and make it a little broader. What's the perfect size? That's a little tricky, but I'm going to tell you this much. A meta-analysis with 5 studies ain't gonna fly. A meta-analysis with 1 million studies ain't gonna fly. There is no ideal number. Why? Because our aim is to gather all the information that's out there. But this has to be manageable, right? Because we're humans, we have a limited number of years on Earth, even more limited number of years with good brain power to do this. So this is why step 1 is probably the most exciting step in the whole process, okay? Because you have to keep revisiting it over and over again. Okay, so again, part of searching the literature is 1, be very thorough in documenting what it is that you're doing from the very get-go. So document the sources that you're searching. You can't just search Google Scholar. It's not going to work. You have to search scientific journals. You have to search textbooks. You have to go to old-fashioned libraries where there are books in print that are not online. Okay? Searching the literature is not easy, my friends. This takes time, this takes effort, and this takes, more importantly, very thorough documentation of everything that you're doing. Why? You don't want to do the same thing twice, first of all, because it is time consuming. And 2, when we talk about empirical, which we mentioned at the beginning, what's one of the things that defines empirical, that defines scientific? reproducibility, right? Whatever you do has to be able to be reproduced. How are people going to be able to reproduce a meta if they don't know how you search for the articles that you included in the meta? So again, documentation is key. Okay, considerations, inclusion and exclusion criteria. This is where the content expert and meta-analyst begin to really work together. The content expert is going to tell you, ooh, I want a study that has these variables and that has these specific age groups and that has these specific sample characteristics and that use these measures and they define things in this way and that way. And the meta-analyst is going to tell you, we need a sample size minimum this large. We need techniques that were strictly quantitative used. They need to have reported means and standard deviations and sample sizes at the very least, otherwise we can't use it. We need X, Y, and Z from a methodological perspective. They need to have used this specific kind of research design. Has to be specifically experimental. You can't be using quasi-experimental. You can't be using correlational. This has to be experimental. So this is where they sit down and hash things out together. Teamwork. Okay, so again, the whole broad versus narrow. If initially you find very little, you need to broaden your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Initially, if you find a lot, you need to narrow that down. Okay, so that's where that comes in with inclusion and exclusion criteria specifically. And the search procedures, again, I cannot stress the importance of thorough documentation of everything that you're doing. Okay. You need to be very organized, specifically when it comes to citations. So do we know about citation software? Citation management software? EndNote? Pro? There was another one, was Pro something back in my day. But yeah, EndNote is one that I've used in the past. Sounds pretty good. But yeah, I highly recommend that you search for citation management software and you get one of those as you start working on a meta-analysis because you're going to need one. You need to have very good time management skills. You need to have a very organized style, whatever that works for you. I've seen some people walk into a room with media papers on the floor and they know exactly where to go to get something. If that works for you, fantastic. Whatever works for you. But as you're doing this, you need to be very organized. You need to keep track of absolutely everything. Nothing is too, I guess, not important. Everything's important. Everything that you do. Every time you sit down to do a search. Every time you sit down with the content expert, with anyone else on your team, to have a discussion about the inclusion-exclusion criteria, anything related to the meta-analysis, take notes. Have some sort of documentation so that later on, if you're having an argument about this study, should we include it, should we exclude it, somebody can be like, oh, remember when we talked about this a year ago? And you said, and I quote, no, we can't have studies like this because of this. You need to have that kind of documentation to make decisions down the line and for publication purposes. You need to describe very thoroughly everything that you did. Because again, reproducibility, empirical, scientific. Okay, gathering information from studies. What should I code? Everything! No, just kidding. No, don't do that. Please don't. This is, again, what you determine during the first step of the process. Your content expert is going to tell you the things, content specific, that they're interested in, mostly related to the research question. You need to code those things. And as a meta-analyst, you need to know the kinds of things that you need to code from a statistical perspective, from a methodological perspective, that are going to be key later on during the actual analysis part of the process. So there is no right or wrong answer. I've never come across any kind of sort of blanking out here, some kind of template that you should all follow when doing a meta-analysis, because this is very field specific. This is very particular meta specific, because at least 50% of it is driven by the content expert and what it is that they want to analyze. But I will walk you guys through an example of what a coding sheet looks like, and definitely what are some of the things that you must gather from the studies. So I can give you a hint as to what some of that is. Sample characteristics. So you might want to code the demographic information of the sample. Design characteristic. What did they do? Did they bring people in for an hour? How long was the treatment? What kind of treatment? Makes sense? That sort of information. How long were the sessions? How often were the sessions? How many times did people come in? So from a methodological standpoint, these are some of the things that you might want to code. Again, a lot of this specific information is going to be determined by the content expert. From a statistical standpoint, obviously, almost every single number in the results section you're going to need. But again, that is largely determined by, to an extent, even the content expert, because it depends on what they want to analyze, what the research question driving the meta-analysis is. Okay, so we're going to talk about what that looks like towards the end of the presentation. So again, some examples of some of the things that you might want to code to be specific. So from a sample, demographics, how people were sampled, if they were just randomly called or emailed through LinkedIn or social media, some of that, right? Measurement, what were some of the questionnaires that were used, right? How many questions did they have? How long did they take to complete? That sort of stuff. Who filled out the questionnaire? Was it a parent? Was it a teacher? Was it the individual? Right? Research design, again, we kind of talked about a little bit about what that entails. So a little bit of, how long was the treatment, how often did people come in, that sort of stuff. Source characteristics, where did you find the article? Did you find it by reading the reference section of a textbook? Did you find it in, what are some of the big journal publication search engines that you guys use? What else some of them at me? ProQuest. What else? There you go. So you need to, again, a lot of this notice comes from the first couple of steps. I'm not telling you at this point anything that you don't know, right? Okay. Again, the outcomes, what was the name of the questionnaire, how many items, how long did it take to complete. A lot of times, articles will report the psychometric properties of the questionnaires that were administered. You should probably code that. At least that's what the meta-analyst will tell you. So what's the reliability? What's the validity of the instrument? Method characteristics, we kind of talked about that too. So any questions? But again, this is all subject to change depending on the meta, depending on the content expert, depending on the research question, depending on what it is that you're trying to study. So there is no right or wrong answer. These are just suggestions. Okay, so this is an example of a coding manual. So mind you, all of this information is just for one study. And this isn't even a real example of what a coding sheet actually looks like. I'm going to show you guys what that really looks like, and it does not look like this. It's bigger, so much bigger. But yeah, this kind of gives you an idea of the sort of information that you need, and it gives you again, suggestion of how you might want to set it up. So in the first sort of column, we're going to have like just basic information about the study. So maybe like the name of the study, the name of the authors, publication year, that sort of stuff. Again, more information related to the article itself. We're not even talking about information contained within the article at this point. We're talking about information contained in the citation of the article. Like I said, you need to be very granular with the level of information that you collect. Very thorough. So you want to know what the publication type is. Again, is it a book chapter? Is it an actual published article? You want to know the publication year, where it was published, this sort of stuff. Moving on to variable level. This is just kind of giving you, as you get further down the line, what this is basically doing is taking the information from, think of it as, I don't know how many of you are sort of in IT, but think of it as really messy data here at the beginning without any, it's not even a CSV file, it's not even comma separated, and some kind of software scrubbing thing comes in, and by the end, it's called an API, don't ask me how it goes, and by the time an API spits it out, you've got the column all the way to the left, which is basically ready to put in statistical software and do your meta-analysis results. It basically takes the study and breaks all of the information down and puts it in the format that it needs to be in, ready for analysis. So this is sort of the process that gets you to that end result. Make sense? Database development. So let's talk about a little more complicated things about a meta. Let's talk about how you actually start getting into closer to the result process. So in one study, you may have multiple outcomes. Why do I say that? Let's say you're doing some kind of PTSD study for soccer players who, particularly goalies, who let teams that didn't deserve to win score on them during the World Cup. These people have PTSD, right? You're going to give them a whole lot of measures to really assess the level of PTSD that they have, right? You might give them some depression measures. You might give them some PTSD measures. You might give them some anxiety measures, right? And you're going to report all of this in your study. The one study. Guess what you need as a meta-analyst? All of that for the one study. So if you gave them some kind of, I think one of the big depression scales is the BDI, at least it was back in my day, which has subscales. In your study, you not only reported the final score, the grand total that the person has on the BDI, but you also reported the subscales, the scores that they got on the subscales. Right then and there, you have multiple outcomes. We haven't even talked about the anxiety measures. We haven't even talked about PTSD measures. We haven't talked about any of that. That's just one instrument giving you multiple outcomes, multiple measurements. What if this person came in 3 times because you were giving them some kind of treatment and you want to track to see if they're getting better? Multiple measurements of the same outcome in the one study for just the one person. So you can see how this gets complicated and how you need tons and tons of information for just one study. And again, we're going to see what that looks like. Okay. So meta-analysis kind of has doing the actual meta-analysis. Once you've done your lit review, you've sort of, you're beginning, you have all the articles that you decided that you're going to include, you have a very clear research question, you have your hypotheses, you have everything that you need to actually sit down and read every single study and code all the information that you need. You have your coding manual ready to go. This has a hierarchical kind of nature, right? So you have the study level information. So like I said, Most of this can be found in the citation itself, right? So the title, the authors, the year, location, if it's a journal, dissertation, if it's book chapter, right? That's the study level information. And then you actually have the ES. ES, you're going to start to hear that term as my presentation progresses. ES is effect size level information. So effect size level information, when you hear effect size, you should automatically think this is the information contained within the study. The information, the numbers, right? So which measure given at which time point? What is the mean for that group? What is the standard deviation for that group? That is the second level of sort of hierarchical information that just one study can contain. And this is relevant in the meta-analysis and when it comes to something that we call moderator analysis, which is sort of the second guiding principle for a meta-analysis that we haven't quite talked about, but we're going to get there. Okay. So basically, once you most of the time end up having like 2 different Excel files or just one with a whole lot of tabs where you collect study level information and then you collect effect size level information. And a lot of times you just end up merging the two in a massive data set for analysis at the end. But the point is, it's important to remember this hierarchical level of information because the study level information is oftentimes just one row in Excel, whereas the effect size level information can be multiple rows for the one study. Make sense? Okay. I have an example of it. Cool. So as you can see, here to the left, we have an example of the study level information. So each row is one study. Over to the right is the effect size level information. So I want you to pay particularly close attention to column A, the study ID. Notice how rows 3, 4, and 5 have the same study ID. So that means that study 161 had 3 rows worth of effect size level information. So we got 3 effect sizes from one study that we're going to synthesize along with all the other effect sizes that we gathered across all the other studies. But still, when we're doing moderator analysis, which again we're going to talk about pretty shortly, what we really need to use is the first, most of the time, is the first sort of data set. So evaluating study quality. Remember at the beginning when we said garbage in, garbage out? Study quality is a big deal in meta-analysis. Guess why? If a study is particularly good and has really high quality information, not a whole lot of missing data. So these are people that really sat down and gave me everything that I needed. Gave me the means, the standard deviations, the sample sizes, told me the reliability and the validity metrics of the instruments that they used. They really told me in detail everything that went on in their study, when people came in, how they were measured, how long they were measured. These people really took the time and put out a quality piece of work. This is a fantastic study, right? As opposed to a study that is 2-3 pages. People came in once. I measured them with VDI. I don't know how many items it has. Here's the mean for group 1, here's the mean for group 2. I don't know how many people were in each group. I still have to include both studies in my meta-analysis, but shouldn't one carry more weight than the other? Study quality. This is where you need the meta-analyst to help you determine from a computational standpoint how to give more weight to studies that have better quality. I'm not going to get into this because, again, this is something that we could talk about for days.
So I just have a quick question. So are there established guidelines to determine quality of studies to use for meta-analysis?
There are a couple of published actual sets of guidelines, like checklists, that meta-analysts use, that actually they sit down, they code all the information from the article, and then they sit down with the guidelines, the sort of like check boxes, and they sit there and it's like, and then they sort of assign a final score based on those actual scoring guidelines. So great question. That does exist. At the moment, there are several. There's not just one. And they tend to be kind of field specific. So for example, the guidelines for medicine, that checklist is a whole lot bigger than the checklist for like social sciences. But that does exist. I don't remember the names of the most frequently used ones, but I can certainly get back to you on that and disseminate with the audience. But yeah, great question. That does exist. And those are tools that the actual meta-analysts, for the most part, will use when coding information from the studies to determine study quality and then add those numbers into the calculations of the results. Okay. So, what do we do once we have quality scores? We can certainly exclude studies. But what's the problem with that? What's our goal? Our first and most important goal? Synthesizing all the information that's out there. So if we exclude studies, that's missing data. We already have a missing data problem, remember? Publication bias. So if we exclude studies that we found, just because they're crappy, we're adding to our missing data problem. And again, like I mentioned, there are things that we can do with those quality scores in our computations at the end to assign more weight to studies that deserve it and a little less weight to studies that were not so good. But again, complicated stuff I'm not necessarily going to get into because it's beyond the scope of the presentation. Okay, so analyzing and integrating outcomes. This is the fun part. This is where you actually already have everything that you need. You have your research question, you have your hypotheses, you've done your lit review, you have all the studies, you've coded all the studies, you have the quality scores for all the studies, you're ready for data analysis. Who doesn't get excited when they have all their data and they're ready to finally do data analysis and figure out what the results are? Most of you probably don't. That's because people don't like stats. But for me, this is the most fun, rewarding part of the process. It's actually sitting down and doing this. And I will show you about 3 lines of code that were used to do this in the study that I was a huge part of. So it basically boils down to that. 3 lines of code. And sitting in front of a screen, possibly for minutes to hours, depending on the size of the data set, just patiently waiting to get those results. But trust me when I tell you this, the moment you do, my face at least lights up like the 4th of July. So that's what this step is all about. It's about you have everything you need, you're going to run the results and figure out what's happening. Okay? So, elements of a meta-analysis. We've touched upon most of this by now. So the study-specific information. Effect sizes are the actual numbers that we get from the studies that we calculate, do some calculations on at the very end. P-values. Who remembers what a p-value is? It's the magic little thing that tells us whether something was significant or not. Okay, once we aggregate the effect sizes of all the studies, we can determine if that is significant or not. Ain't that cool? So meta-analysis still gives us p-values. Precision. Confidence intervals. We remember what that was, right? So we can say this is the overall effect size for all the effect sizes, for all the studies, for everything that's out there on this one topic. And this is statistically significant, and we're 95% confident that it truly lies between this and this. Pretty cool, right? Okay. Weights. We kind of talked about that. So this is study quality, right? And the summary, effect, and its significance level. We have a couple other things like heterogeneity. Do we remember the term heterogeneity? Whether there's a lot of variability going on in something versus something that's very homogeneous, very alike. We have that in meta-analysis too. And we're going to talk about that in a second. Okay, so from a specific study, like I said, we can collect a whole lot of information, right? But what we really want to focus on here is the effect size. Do we remember what an effect size is? What are two big things an effect size tells us? Magnitude of the relationship, right? Or whatever it is that we're, of the phenomenon that we're studying. And the direction, so whether it's positive or negative, right? Do you remember this? Cool. So, meta-analysis, you know, we talked about a lit review, we talked about a systematic review, we talked about meta-analysis. What distinguishes meta-analysis is we code effect sizes from all the studies. That's the quantitative part that we really, as a meta-analyst, we code from all the studies. We do some math on these things. This is where the math comes in. Okay? So, to me, this is the really exciting part. Okay. Like I said, there's a p-value associated with the final computation of all the effect sizes in a meta-analysis that basically tells us if overall the results for everything that we just studied is significant or not. So if it's willing to happen by chance or if it's random, right? So the effect of drinking a glass of wine every single day, is it going to make me happier significantly? Or is it random? Is it going to make me happy sometimes? Is it going to make me sad and hug my cat other times? It's inconclusive, right? So that's what the p-value for meta-analysis tells us. Precision, again, the confidence interval around that overall effect size. And the weights, we talked about, it's the study quality weights that we assign to each study, some kind of computational figure. Okay, so why are we using effect sizes? Why don't we just get the t-value? Or why don't we get the f-test value? Why don't we get a regression coefficient? Why don't we get an effect size? What happens if I have a huge sample? What's going to happen to my test statistic? Do we remember that? It's going to be significant by default, regardless of what the treatment was, what the actual effect was. Because effect size is manipulating the denominator of my test statistics. I mean, not effect size, sample size, I'm sorry. Sample size is a very heavy influencer of the denominator of my test statistics. Right? Do you remember that concept? See some of you nodding? Good. That's why we don't use test statistics from a mathematical standpoint. That's why we use effect sizes. From a theoretical standpoint, we use effect sizes because magnitude, strength, and direction. What are examples of effect sizes? Who remembers? Two big ones. Come on.
Cohen's d.
Cohen's d. What else? odds ratio, yes. Those are all excellent examples of effect sizes. So these are the metrics that we actually compute from individual studies that at the end we synthesize in a meta-analysis. Okay, so again, a little bit more on that. The whole concept of sample size and how it influences and biases test statistics and why we prefer effect sizes. So effect sizes can be thought of as the dependent variable in our meta-analysis. Remember the concept of dependent and independent variable? Effect sizes are our dependent variable in meta-analysis. Okay. So I've talked about this summary statistic for a little bit. So let's break that down. So it's basically, think of it sort of as an average of all the effect sizes included in the meta-analysis. It's not that simple, but for sort of conceptual understanding, it'll do. It's basically a weighted average of all the effect sizes in the meta-analysis. It has two possible interpretations. Interpretation number one, it is the common effect size shared by all studies in the meta-analysis. So let's say again we're studying PTSD, soccer goalies that got scored on in the World Cup, right? So we studied 20 studies of different goalies across all the World Cups, their PTSD scores. We have Cohen's D's. We get a weighted average of all of those Cohen's D's across all of those studies. So we can say across time, across the world, the average common PTSD score of all these goalies that got scored on at the World Cup in history is this much. Conceptually, that's what it means. Alternatively, it could be just not the common effect size that all the studies share, but the average effect size that all the studies share. When do we say it's the common effect size? When do we say it's the average effect size? Heterogeneity. So if the studies in the meta-analysis are very heterogeneous, they're very different, people from all over the world, all kinds of different time periods, chances are your meta-analysis heterogeneity statistic is going to be pretty high. In that case, we go with the average effect size for all the studies. Whereas if all the studies are very homogeneous, they're studying people in the same region in the past 5 years, chances are all of those studies are going to be very homogeneous. So then in that case, we conceptually state that the studies have a common effect size, not an average one. Make sense? And there are implications for this, of course. Oh, and either way, that common or average effect size, regardless of model, is going to have a p-value that's going to let us know whether that effect size is statistically significant or not. Meaning, this is true, this is not random, or it's random. Okay. So heterogeneity, we were just talking about that. The heterogeneity of the common or the average effect size. What that boils down to is studies that are wildly different from each other versus studies that are very similar to each other. So can you think of maybe examples of this? Something like social sciences lends itself for very heterogeneous studies. Why? They can be done across any language. So there's not the language barrier, right? How many languages are there? A lot of these questionnaires have been translated quite successfully. They have good reliability, right? So that alone, just the language, the geographic region, right, introduces a lot of heterogeneity in the studies that we can combine on the same topic, like depression. It's a universal topic, universal construct that can be studied across multiple languages, multiple regions. You got the idea. What about biology? Genealogy. It's a little more confined, right? We share 90 some crazy percentage of our DNA, right? So those kinds of studies tend to be a little more homogeneous across the board. Those studies are going to have a common effect size. Heterogeneous studies, usually in social sciences, have an average effect size. There's not a whole lot of compounding. The best we can do is average things out. That's why we have to examine the heterogeneity of the overall effect size that we got from our meta-analysis, whether it's significant or not. Okay. Common effect size, fixed effects model. That's all you need to know. Average effect size, very, very heterogeneous studies, random effects model. That's all you need to know. Bottom line, how do you determine which kind of modeling technique you're going to apply to arrive at your last major summary effect size? Whether it's fixed or random, that depends on the level of heterogeneity of all the studies in the meta. But certainly, step one, determine how heterogeneous all the studies are. Based on that, if they're very heterogeneous, there's a simple test for this called the Q-statistic. If that's significant, you're going to use a random effects model, and your effect size is going to be the average one. If your Q-statistic is not significant, your studies are very homogeneous, and you're going to use a common effect size for all of them. If your effect size is common and you use the fixed effects model, you're done. Congratulations, you published your first meta-analysis. If your studies are very heterogeneous and you have an average effect size, congratulations, you get to do more work. This is when you get to do moderator analysis. So you basically get to do what you would do with a t-test or an ANOVA on your big major effect size to determine if there are further differences that explain that average effect size. So you have the average effect size for all the studies. All the studies were on depression. You think across the board, for all the studies out there, for the entire population of the world, you think depression is going to differ between males and females. And you have that average effect size already for all the studies out there. You can do moderator analysis to determine if there's a separate average effect size for males on depression, separate average effect size for females with depression. Ain't that cool? I think it's awesome. Also, this is, remember when I mentioned we have study level characteristics and we have effect size level characteristics? This is where they come into play. Moderator analysis. This is where you can determine also from a study level perspective if dissertations have lower average effect sizes than published studies. Why would that be the case? Dissertations usually have smaller samples. Or they're usually pilot studies where all the kinks haven't been worked out for the treatment. Published studies, maybe not so much. Get the idea? So this is why we need to code study level information, and this is why we need to code actual within the study effect size level information, because chances are our overall effect size statistic, summary statistic, is going to be heterogeneous, and we're going to use that information to do moderator analysis and further break down that overall effect size into smaller parts. Good? Okay. Okay, yeah, so I just talked about heterogeneity and relative effects models. There's more on that. Okay, cool. So, give you a quick sort of breakdown. Like I said, we have a Q statistic that measures the heterogeneity of effect sizes in a meta-analysis. This is the first thing we're going to compute. If that Q statistic is not significant, you're going to run an effects model, you're going to get your common effect size, and you're going to publish. If that Q statistic is significant, you're going to calculate an average effect size for all the studies. You're going to do moderator analysis. It could be categorical if you're trying to break down the average effect into groups. Or it can be regression-like if you have continuous moderator variables. So continuous moderator variables would be something like publication year. You want to see if across the time span the effect sizes got bigger or decreased. You can do a regression like moderator analysis at that point. Once you've done your moderator analysis, you're going to get more Q statistics because you want to see if that moderator explained all the heterogeneity that was going on in your effect sizes. Chances are that moderator explained everything. If it did, you're going to publish and you're done. If it didn't, you're going to pick another moderator and you're going to do the same thing. And this is going to go on and on and on until you call it quits and publish, or until you've reached finally a Q statistic that is not significant. In conclusion, doing a meta-analysis takes so much patience, so much work, so many years, so much teamwork, but it's so fulfilling. Any questions?
On the average, how long does it take to do an analysis?
I couldn't tell you. It depends on the discipline. So it depends on whether it's social science, whether it's medical, whether it's social science. I could go further into this. So it depends if it's how broad the topic is, if it's within psychology, if it's sociology, if it's depression, something that's very broad, or if it's something like just psychotherapy for children, which is very narrow. But in my personal experience, it's never been less than a year. From conceptualization to completely done, no less than a year. No way. Any other questions? Yeah.
What goes into the Q statistic and how is it calculated? And what's kind of software? That's not something in SPSS?
R.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you some of the code that we use to analyze this. The actual calculations, I was asked to keep this very high level.
Okay. Do you use like SAS or something then? Is that type in code into that?
It is possible to do meta-analysis in SPSS, but not through the click menu. You have to do it through the syntax back part of it. I have code that's about 6 years old, if not older. To get this one in SPSS, I don't really even trust it anymore because I was like version 18 or something. So I'd have to get back to you on that. But the code to do it in R, especially if you use RStudio, which is a little more appealing, it's not difficult at all. Nonetheless, this is a team sport.
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're going to be more of the content person. It's great that you want to understand what goes on behind the scenes, but I would highly recommend that you work with a meta-analyst or someone who at the very least has the skill set to do the result portion of it. Anything else? I saw some other hands, I think. Okay, ready for an example? Cool. So, finally, yeah, you have to interpret the results and write things up. I figured that goes without saying. Yeah. You have to record things. I'm going to show you what that looks like. So, come on. Okay, so the first sort of reference here that I wanted to point out is sort of, actually no, the second. The second reference is sort of the most cited reference for meta-analysis ever. A lot of people actually think of this as sort of the inception of meta-analysis. So just for that purpose, it's there. The first reference is my Bible. So it's the Handbook of Research, Synthesis, and Meta-Analysis. If you're really interested in ever doing a meta-analysis, I highly, highly, highly recommend that book and that you get your hands on it, the sooner the better.
What is the name?
Oh, it's there. It's the first reference. So the first reference is what I recommend if you actually want to learn more and you want to do this hands-on. And it's written pretty clearly, not a crazy statistical level. It's in English for the most part. So that's what I would recommend. And again, the second reference is just sort of this is meta-analysis, the inception of meta-analysis. Okay, the third reference is one of the last meta-analyses that I actually worked on, and what I'm going to walk you guys through. So this one, as you can tell, I was not a content person. I was a know-how person. The content person were the first and third authors, and the know-how people were the second and fourth authors. So this was an meta-analysis basically on psychotherapy interventions for children. And we published it in 2016, but based on what I told you, I'm pretty sure you can guess that we did not start working on this in 2016. So, as much as I hate to admit it, this is already outdated. Because everything that has been published on psychotherapy for children and adolescents since probably 2015 is not on this. So it no longer reflects an accurate view of the field of psychotherapy for children and adolescents. But if you're interested in that, it's probably a good starting point. Okay, so this particular meta is.
Oh, I just want to make a quick comment. So everyone has the handouts from the slides, but everyone also has this nice example that she's presenting on, the article. That's what that article is that you have with your notes, so you can follow along in the article.
Okay, so yes.
One question. Would you suggest that you only include literature from the last 10 years in your meta-analysis, or go back further?
That is the first point of contention between a true meta-analyst and a content person. When we sat down to do this, my mentor, the meta-analyst, said, "We need everything." And the content person was like, "No, psychotherapy has evolved. We only need the last 10 years." So, I don't know how to answer that. My best guess would be whoever makes the strongest argument as to what you should go with wins. Sorry, I don't have a better answer. Like I said, this is super scientific, guys. Okay, so this particular article, we didn't have just one research question. This was social sciences. We collected studies from literally all over the world for I don't know how many years. And we knew that our Q for our effect size was going to be ridiculously heterogeneous. So as a result, we had multiple research questions anticipating that we would be doing moderator analyses. But the first research question sort of concerns the overall main effect size, and this is an example of what that might look like. Obviously we're saying we reviewed the literature. I believe we put these guys because they have done some kind of systematic reviews that gave us sort of a starting point for our meta-analysis and for what really should be in there, and then we went out and got more stuff. So we're basically saying, okay, to what extent are treatments effective for children and adolescents? What kind of treatments? Psychotherapy. So right there, we defined a whole lot of stuff that we're focusing on. Like I said, this is step one. You really have to get this down pat from the very get-go. This isn't any different from any other study that you've ever done. I promise you that, right? You have to get that research question clearly defined from the get-go, no matter what you're doing. This isn't unique to meta-analysis. And then obviously, hypotheses. Based on what we've reviewed, we anticipate the treatments are going to be effective, right? And then we're going to do a bunch of moderator analyses to see how different kinds of psychotherapeutic treatments differ. We're going to do some kind of male-female stuff. We're going to do all kinds of moderator stuff to come because we anticipate that this is going to be an average, this is going to be heterogeneous. Good? Cool. So this is a very sort of quick look at what the beginning process looks like and why I told you to document everything. So we're basically saying these are the total number of records identified ever that could be used for this meta-analysis. This is the total number that we actually screened. Screening means that we at the very least read all the abstracts for about 12,000 studies. When I say we, it's because I was one of those people that read the abstracts of at least 12,000 studies. Like I said, time consuming. Once we decided based on the abstracts if these were good candidates for inclusion, based on inclusion-exclusion criteria that we had clearly defined, we kept moving on down the hierarchy of what would actually make it into the meta-analysis. But like I said, detailed records. You have to let people know what you did specifically in case anybody wants to replicate this. Okay, and like I said, you have some idea there on the right of what kind of information you need to be collecting during the search process. So, yeah, the search process itself, the figure on the left gives you an idea. You have the article, so feel free to read all the procedures that went into just the search process, and then the coding. Okay, so the coding. I promise you, this is her. I promise you a coding agenda, and a coding agenda you shall get. Okay, so one tab, the first one, is just kind of devoted just to tracking what in the world is going on. Our study IDs were basically, we decided that it was the last name and the first couple of letters of the first author, and the year that it was published. Why? Oh, look at that. Becker, no. Bernstein published I don't know how many articles. Yeah, this happens a lot. So, but I mean, for study ID, the naming convention that you choose, as long as it's easy to identify which study it is that you're talking about and you're very thorough in organizing this, whatever naming convention works for you, works for you. And then here, we're just kind of deciding whether we rejected something or not, and on what basis. This was basically just based on I believe, the abstracts at this point. Okay, study info. Remember how we said we're going to keep study info separate from effect size info? Study info. So we have the study ID, the publication type, methodology, whether they did random assignment of participants or not. Specifically, which kind of random assignment method. You got the idea. This goes on and on and on. For every single study. This is just tracking each row belongs to just one study. Why do we have a couple of columns in yellow? We recoded whatever was written out into numbers for analytical purposes. Because R analyzes numbers, not so much string. So the yellow columns were the columns that we were going to actually take into R for analysis later on. Information pertaining to effect size. So this study, the first one, had 14 effect sizes. And each row is all the information that belongs to that one effect size. So things like subgroup, whether it was the total number of participants, the entire sample, or whether it was the treatment, or whether it was the control, or whether it was the placebo. We had to identify which group the effect size belonged to, what the effect size was, if it was Cohen's d, if it was an F-test, if it was an odds ratio, if it was a correlation. You got the idea. All kinds of stuff. As you can see, this is not perfect because we have missing data within the studies. Why do we have missing data? People didn't report things that they were supposed to. Guess what kind of study quality score they got? Not a very good one. Okay. Then we break it down even further. We have the studies that did comparisons, so treatment control. These are studies that we mostly got Cohen's D's from, and studies that did pre-post. We also got Cohen's D's, but the design is different. We're comparing the same group of people pre-post as opposed to different people. In one group, treatment versus another group, control. Methodologically, we know this is different. In meta-analysis, this makes a difference. We have to analyze the treatment group, Cohen D's, separate from the pre-post Cohen D's. That's why we had to differentiate. And this goes on and on and on. I also promised you 6 lines of code for analyzing everything that I just showed you. There they are. The first line here and here is just notes and R. If you do pound, hashtag, whatever we're calling it nowadays, that's how you write a note, and R. What follows is the actual code to analyze the data set that we put into R. The first one, I believe, was the treatment control groups. The second one was the pre-post. And why do we have 2 analyses for both? Fixed effects, random effects. That's how we determined which model we were going to use for the analysis. Because this line of code gives me all kinds of statistics. It gives me the overall effect size, it gives me the p-value for that effect size, it gives me the Q statistic that lets me know whether that effect size is heterogeneous or not. With its p-value, it gives me confidence intervals, it gives me everything. So with 2 lines of code, we knew we weren't going to use the fixed effects because, I mean, come on, that was going to be super heterogeneous. But you get the idea. We wanted to be methodologically sound and scientific, so we ran both models. So we ran both models for treatment versus control ONDs, and we ran fixed and random effects models for pre-post designs, ONDs. We also got R's, correlation coefficients, that we did separate analyses for, a fixed effects model and a random effects model. We also got chi-squares, so we got odds ratios that we did separate analyses for, fixed effects model and random effects model. We did a lot of stuff. If you want to know specifically what we did, I highly recommend that you read the article, but furthermore, we wrote it. We typed up the results. So this is an example of how to report your analysis results APA style. So for ANOVA, we report the F, the p-value, the eta squared. For t-tests, we report the t, the p, the Cohen's d. Meta-analysis is no different. The little g's with the bar are the overall effect sizes. Notice how down here somewhere, there should be a Q somewhere. I don't see it, but I promise it's in there. Oh, Q total. There it is. Q total statistics. So that gives you an idea of how to report things APA style. If you think you're done at that point, I'm sorry, no you're not. Just like with any other study, if you're dealing with treatment control, you're going to report the means, the standard deviations, the sample sizes. Tables are fantastic for that kind of stuff, am I right? Yeah, you need to report a lot of stuff for meta, so you might want to put it in a table too. Otherwise, you're going to be writing for years. So in this case, again, the G's are the overall, in this case, this is a fixed effect model. So what is the interpretation of G? Common effect size for all the studies with the standard error, confidence intervals for the estimate, the Q's, random effects model information. You got the idea. Okay.
So I'm sorry, there's no Q over the random effects model, so there's like one Q to determine which
This
model
Q?
to follow?
Yes.
Okay.
Both, the computation of Q in each case is going to be exactly the same because it's trying to determine the level of heterogeneity for both. What's going to differ is the computation of the effect size depending on whether you're assuming that it's a common one, so the computation is going to be a little more restrictive. Whereas if you're assuming that it's an average one, the computation is going to be more broad, if you will. That's the simplest answer. But the Q is going to be the same because it's the level of heterogeneity no matter what.
Okay, and why do we have small r squared over there in the random effects model? Small r squared.
I believe this was part of moderator analysis. So I think that's what that's getting at. Per sort of, yeah, this is moderator analysis. So that's related to the specificity of the moderator analysis, which I didn't get.
That's a different, that's not, that's the total.
What's K effect? Right next to Q total.
K effect means the total number of effect sizes that went into the computation of the Q. So the way you basically read this is we had, remember, Cohen's D's that were based on treatment control. We had Cohen's D's that were based on pre-post. So that's sort of the first breakdown between both. And then we have several outcomes. So we have school attendance, school achievement, blah, 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 blah. So the way you read K effect is for school attendance with treatment control designs, we had 9 studies.
Okay.
Excellent question. Anything else? But I think this is all pretty clearly explained in the article, so.
I think you just mentioned it, but what's the difference between standard mean differences and standard mean changes?
Mean differences, treatment control, mean changes, pre-post.
Oh, so overall. Oh, so those would be studies in which there was no treatment versus control group, it's just one group.
Tested,
Right.
pre-post.
Okay.
I mean, for more details about the article, I believe you guys have it. If not, you have
Right.
the citation for it. I didn't write a whole lot of it, that's why I'm fourth author. But I did do the coding of each and every single study, and I did the search of all the literature. So that's why I'm more down the methodological end of things, not so much the content
Yeah.
end of things. Any other questions for me? All right, that,
Well,
yeah.
no, I'm sorry. So, I mean, anything that calls itself a meta-analysis should have a table like this.
No, anything that calls itself a meta-analysis should have done a summary effect size statistic computation. If it's very small with very few studies with just one outcome, it doesn't need a table this way. Also, it depends on whether they did moderator analysis or not. Remember this,
I know it may not be exactly the same, but should they all have this Q statistic?
they should report Q statistics, they should report random effects models,
Okay,
and fixed effect models depending on what they did. So the G's,
okay,
the standard error for the G's, the confidence intervals for the G's, the Q statistics, all of that is necessary, yes.
okay.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for bearing with me. I hope it was fun for you. Fun for you. If you have any questions, I'll stick around for a few minutes. And if you're interested in doing meta-analysis and you want someone to sort of maybe help you out, as long as you make me last author and you don't make me do a lot of work, count me in.
So then, ask now how many of us are going to do meta-analysis.
How many of you guys are going to do math? Everybody!
All right, so before everybody leaves, I just wanted to make a quick announcement as well as a couple comments. Some of you are standing, you've got your bags on your shoulders, you're ready to go, but I promise just a couple more minutes. So first, I think we should just give it up for Marietta one more time for sharing. In terms of the announcement, there is a sign-in sheet at the back. I forgot to mention that. I know a lot of you students getting extra credit perhaps, so that's important to make sure that you sign in. And then I just want to make 3 quick comments, just to kind of elaborate on a couple things that Marietta said that I think applies to most of us in this room, or some of us in this room. And I say that because I know some of you are undergraduate students, and so for many of you, probably right over your head, a lot of this. That's understandable, okay? It's really just a quick introduction, just to kind of show you this one particular statistical technique, and if it's something you're interested in, obviously I think Marietta really emphasized seeking that expertise from someone knowledgeable on it. But one thing that she mentioned was that I do think is important to highlight is that not all systematic literature reviews are meta-analyses, okay? But all meta-analyses are systematic literature reviews, and so there is a distinction. I know some students use those 2 terms interchangeably, but they are distinct. Also, Marietta emphasized that meta-analyses are, a team effort. And so even though that definitely is the case, I don't want that to preclude anybody from maybe doing a meta-analysis, especially some of the graduate students here that are thinking about dissertations or doctoral projects. We have some faculty here. So in terms of like the team approach, if we're thinking about it here at Albizu, you know, you would want to think about, you know, who would be on your committee for like a dissertation or a thesis. And so that means like maybe an outside reader, someone that you can bring in that has that statistical expertise that can serve on your committee. And then, you know, obviously with coding, that's a pretty big effort, you know, as Marietta talked about. And so, you know, depending on your meta-analysis, if it doesn't include that many studies, it is possible that a student can do that for their dissertation or doctoral project. But oftentimes, you know, especially nowadays, science requires this team approach. And so that would mean including maybe other students. You know, if you're a part of a particular research group or research lab, you know, there are other students that you can involve. Even if it's for a dissertation, they can help with the coding. Obviously, they wouldn't be an author on your dissertation, but then if you were to publish it later, you would include them as a co-author. So that's kind of the trade-off there. And, you know, then finally, I know everyone in this room should be at least familiar with SPSS. And so obviously that's, you know, what everyone is trained on. That's kind of the go-to statistical software package. But as Marietta alluded to, there are other packages that are preferred for meta-analyses. And so, you know, you can do a meta-analysis in SPSS, but it's pretty rare, especially in reputable journals and things like that. And so I bring that up because, you know, as the director of the research center, which exists, which is here on campus, you know, we do offer internal research grants. Okay, and so that's a process where you can apply for money. And the reason I bring that up is because for like a meta-analysis, you know, you may need different software. So even though all computers here on campus are equipped with SPSS, you know, they're not equipped with a package like R or M+, or SAS, or any of those other acronyms. And so just keep in mind, if you're interested in doing a meta-analysis, you may need other software. And so I don't want the lack of these other options on campus to preclude you. Know that there is funding, okay? So I have a separate line in my budget for these sorts of things. I am just trying to give away money, but don't get a lot of interest. And so if you can justify the funds, then, you know, it's not all that competitive. And then also, speaking about internal research grants, for whether it's a dissertation, but maybe like an independent study, you know, we do have funds if you'd like to hire like a statistical consultant, you know, someone like Marietta. So, you know, that is a way that you can bring someone from outside of Albizu, join your team, work on an article with you. There are funds to do that. All right, and so that is all I've got.